Hello and welcome to the Business of the Business podcast. I am your co-host, JP John Paz from the Two Man Power Trip. Of course, joining me is the pro wrestling financial genius himself, Mr. Lovey Margolin. Lovey, how you doing today, sir?
Hey, John. Today's episode is a special one. We're expecting a guest a little bit later, but in one of the biggest weeks in pro wrestling history, WWE Netflix deal, and then some horrible insight into Vince McMahon's life and behavior followed basically the day after. But in our true fashion, I want to start out the show by talking about reality of wrestling.
Yeah, I know everyone else is talking about that. We like to talk about some of the other topics that's not, hammered into the ground a million times. Obviously, the Vince stuff, there's going to be so much more to come out of that. Now, I was talking to a lawyer friend, and he was saying you have to say it's allegedly all the Vince stuff that's about to come out. So who knows, what's true and what's not. But obviously, horrific stuff like that. I know I'm speaking a little bit lawyerese here, allegedly, and all that other nonsense. But horrific stuff coming out of that news, especially after the Netflix stuff. It was like, oh my God, they're on a roll, they're on fire, they're on hot, and then cooled right off with the crazy Vince and Johnny Ace stuff. Ooh, nuts.
Yeah, it's definitely allegedly, and Vince is
Yeah.
prepared, according to his representation, to vigorously defend such allegations
Yep.
forthwith. But I was reflecting late last night, probably when I should have been getting some sleep, that this is sort of the history of pro wrestling. Last time we talked about the history of pro wrestling in the 1800s through 1930s, but if we think about the history of pro wrestling, basically in the McMahon era, there's this period where pro wrestling is gaining mainstream acceptance. The Hogan era.
Hmm.
Very excited for your forthcoming book, John. And
Thank you.
then it falls apart, right? Steroid scandals, sex scandals is one thing. And then things build back up again. And then you have deaths in pro wrestling. You have, from a content perspective, the lowbrow attitude era. Then rebuilding things back up, you have Chris Benoit, you know, double murder, homicide, suicide with his family, of course, all those sorts of things. So it's like the mainstream that doesn't really watch pro wrestling is sort of ready to accept it at different periods, but then there's something that pops up where it just like drags it right back into the gutter.
Oof. Crazy, and obviously more to come from the story for sure. But what's going on with reality of wrestling? Because that was some pretty surprising news coming from them.
So I love collaborations, especially among pro wrestling promotions that are established themselves. And when we've talked about television distribution, two of the strongest, of course, Dave Marquez's Universal Wrestling Network, but really best known as Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. Then an offshoot that really stands on its own, Memphis Wrestling. But Booker T's Reality of Wrestling has great distribution in Texas and then on a number of smaller stations through various means throughout the US. So if you were to think about pro wrestling outside of the bigger challenger brands, more of the independent promotions, right up there with Ohio Valley Wrestling are these two promotions. So not necessarily yet from a television perspective are they working together. That's sort of where I'm thinking about. But right now they've agreed to a talent exchange. ROW, Memphis Wrestling, and Championship Wrestling from Hollywood announced a groundbreaking talent exchange program. In a landmark collaboration, ROW have announced the groundbreaking talent exchange. The initiative is set to revolutionize pro wrestling. It's a testament to the shared vision of the three promotions. Booker T said this is a game changer. We're breaking down barriers and bringing together some of the best talents. So I guess a lot, a lot of fluff in this press release. So, but basically they'll be exchanging talent. I had meant to Google Map the distance between Houston, Texas, and Los Angeles, California. Certainly a lot closer to each other. Texas and California, neighboring states, but quite large states. Memphis sort of stands on its own, but in terms of the larger two, that makes a lot of sense. Then another interesting tidbit from Reality of Wrestling, making moves. Their venue, their home venue, is now called, and I love this name, Walker Texas Lawyer Arena. ROW, in partnership with Walker Texas Lawyer, is proud to announce the renaming of their new sports arena and training facility in Texas City, Texas, to the Walker Texas Lawyer Arena. Can anything be more Texas than this? Texas City, Texas, the Walker Texas Lawyer Arena. This exciting development marks a new chapter for ROW as they continue to expand their presence in the world of pro wrestling. The arena will now serve as the central hub for ROW's monthly shows, which are aired on CW 39. Fans can expect an enhanced viewing experience with state-of-the-art facilities that the new arena brings. The partnership between ROW and the Lawyer officially begins on January 13th, live event Slamuary, where the announcement was first made. Collaboration represents a significant investment in the future of pro wrestling and a commitment to delivering top-tier entertainment to fans.
Love that name. Is it after Walker Texas Ranger? Is that what's going on? The great show
That's
with
what
Chuck
I'm
Norris?
thinking. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I don't know. The Lawyer, I guess I should have looked it up. Who is Walker Texas Lawyer? I'm assuming his first or last name is Walker, but probably the rest is a play on the name.
I love Walker Texas Ranger, the old Chuck Norris TV show. I used to love that show. I used to watch this show like crazy. Good stuff
My
there.
best context for it is, of course, what was it? SummerSlam '94, when he was the special enforcer for the Undertaker Yokozuna casket match.
Was it Survivor Series '94?
Oh, Survivor Series. Okay, thank you.
And he lays that great crescent kick.
Yes, and that was also the Survivor Series where did Owen and Brad break up at that one, or that was the title match with Backlund?
Backlund, yeah. Owen
Backlund,
throws in the towel, or has his mom throw in the towel, yeah.
So, John, I'm not sure if you saw this on Twitter, and I guess I shouldn't be doing this too much because I don't follow the creative as much, but it appears that Cody Rhodes is not going to be able to finish the story at WrestleMania. And he's been branded so much of finish the story, and he's beloved by kids and everything like that. But it's really hard to come back from something like that. So my idea is that after WrestleMania, he snaps like Bob Backlund,
Yes.
who was later in his career just looking at his hands like, finish the story, and he becomes like the ultimate heel.
That's not a bad idea, actually. I kind of like that. Would work for him because he hasn't been able to finish the story. Lesnar stopped him, and now Punk is getting in his way. Rollins and Gunther, all these other obstacles that are kind of getting in his way from finishing the story with Roman. So yeah, I could see that. That wouldn't be a bad idea.
I think the only challenge is that maybe it's like magnified because smartly he responds to a lot of these posts, but it always seems like parents are always tweeting him about their kids, maybe because one parent saw that he responds to somebody else like, I want to get on there, but it just seems like he's beloved by kids. So I don't know, turning him heel, like if it would turn some kids off forever. I always thought that turning Bailey heel was just like over something.
A mistake, but I feel like Cena back in the day, he should have turned heel. Him not turning heel really hurt the business, just as far as the fact that they weren't gaining any fans with him in the PGA. They're actually losing fans like crazy.
I was thinking the same thing. Do you think the window has closed for him to become NWA Cena? NWO Cena?
There's no way. Yeah, there's no way now. No. And he's so like done wrestling, like just physically. I don't think it would work. Like his last few matches have been like, borderline. He just can't even move anymore. It's pretty crazy.
Oh, okay. Because I was thinking like, you only have to wrestle like twice a year now, if that. But
you're right, Roman style, yeah.
If there's not much to give, but it always seemed like that was like money that was I guess left on the table at this point, but it always seems like something that was still on the table where you had that ultimate face, not at the same level of Hogan during the Hogan years, but that person that once they had turned to face, like never turned back again. But it was that first time where like the company had to acknowledge that some people were booing and some people were cheering, whereas they always like to control the narrative otherwise.
Yep. Yeah, what a weird era where the top babyface getting booed by half the arena. What a weird era, but for some reason they never turned him. They should have, obviously a huge mistake. But as far as what's going on with Bushi Road and New Japan Pro Wrestling, to change gears here, what's going on with them? Because I feel like they're selling way more tickets in Chicago than I thought, but they might be losing Okada. But what's going on?
So, for the second week in a row, I'll admit I was dead wrong about this Windy City Riot show. I mean, I haven't doubted them since the initial sellout, but they have well, I hope it's a strategy, unless they're just trying to figure out the logistics of their ticket setup. But they sold out, thankfully, to WrestleTix for tracking this. They sold out quickly the 3,500 tickets initial allotment, and then they added about 1,000 more, and that sold out right away too. So they're at over 4,500 tickets sold for this big Wintrust Arena venue, which is about 10,000 seats depending on the setup. But they haven't opened it back up again. So they said, "Thank you for selling through another allotment. Demand is huge, and we'll continue working to fulfill it, or I guess to fulfill it or fill it. I'm not sure what they meant, but um, to me, this seems actually really smart because they're creating um, false scarcity and demand, meaning that if you opened up the whole 10,000 seats, obviously I was wrong, so I don't want to keep going on the edge, but maybe it would have all sold out right away. I'm doubtful. But here you're like, okay, there's just 1,000 new tickets released. I better get on it. And if you miss it the next time, it's like even more so. And you maybe tell people, don't miss out. So this might actually be a smart strategy for others to follow in the future.
When they first said they were doing that building, like I kind of agreed with you. I was like, man, that's kind of crazy. But then it's like, okay, 3,000 tickets, and then it's like, oh wow, they sold that out. Now it's 4,000 tickets, sold that out. Now it's 4,500, sold that out. So yeah, maybe that is kind of the strategy. See, just to see how much demand there really is.
It's amazing to see. And I was about to put the dirt on New Japan in the US, like as a viable brand without, not being able to stand alone without AEW. But given the demand, and obviously this is like a one-off thing, right? And AEW runs 100 shows a year in the US or thereabouts, right? So, but is is New Japan more of a draw now than AEW? I would say not, right? Like, because when they have the big shows, World's End, the Sting retirement, and so on. But we're getting awful numbers now for Dynamite and Rampage and all these shows that sometimes a few weeks out, and it usually picks up, they're sub 1,000 tickets sold, and now some of the shows are under 2,000 tickets. So we're looking at like the best of New Japan of what they can do compared to like the worst case scenario for AEW. But it's interesting to see that, as the shine comes off of AEW, I don't know what the bottom is. We saw this with Ring of Honor, which never reached the heights of AEW in any way. But when things got bad, they got really bad.
Yeah. What do you think about them losing Okada? I know Fight Opinion, our buddies at Fight Opinion had something to say about it.
So, right, as the insights. So based on that, Bushi Road Corporate is absolutely burning the major Japanese markets with an insane volume of shows in major buildings. They have an AEW arena level problem, but worse. Now they're dollar chasing. And he thinks that coming to the U.S. is just to find dollars. I guess every company wants to make money, but I guess based on this lens that Bushi Road is in some trouble in Japan. We know that their stock was way down. I don't know if it recovered, but Stardom has a different strategy, which I think is a smart one as well. They'll be part of the WrestleMania weekend festivities at the 2300 Arena. Stardom American Dream 2024, Thursday, April 4th. According to WrestleTix, as you know, John, there's the 4 reserve sections in the 2300 Arena, but then there's the 4 corners. So of the 658 reserve tickets, only 37 tickets remain. 3 of the 4 GA corners are sold out. So looking great, looking like a true sellout for Stardom. And I think the best way for them to go in the US, just come like on these, for the most part, to come on these special weekends, because you have the super fans that are into it. it wouldn't be the worst idea to try a modest tour of the US. Like I would book small venues, like classy theater type venues where it's 800 to 1200 seats. Charge a lot for them because you have super fans that are willing to pay to see it rather than a broad interest in the market, as I would speculate, and see if you could make money that way. That worked out really well for New Japan when they ran Times Square a couple of years ago, of smaller venue, but they charged really high prices, and it seemed to be hundreds of thousands of dollars, at the gate.
Ooh, a lot of money we're looking at here for sure. But I don't know if New Japan is in a strong footing without Okada. But it's weird. They sold out in the U.S. Not doing well in Japan. Weird. But is Stardom also like in trouble at all, or are they doing good?
It's hard to tell. I don't have my pulse on Japan. From what I gather, that they were running too many shows, so that they were thinking about that a little bit more with like Bushi Road. Like overall, there's all these management changes and issues to manage. So we have to see how things shake out. But I think in terms of the U.S. lens, that Stardom still has like a certain appeal, uniqueness, and the opportunity to see them isn't here that often. I know that, right? Sukiban uses some Stardom talent in a very different way, so Stardom still stands alone. To me, I wouldn't mix it with New Japan in the U.S. Um, Keep it unique, keep it to itself, and you have people that are very interested in what they have to offer, and who are willing to pay for it.
What is going on with GCW?
GCW has started out 2024 basically as hot as possible, given their stature. I'm really looking at the first 5 shows that they have of the year, putting aside Effie's Big Gay Brunch. I usually look at like things like Janela and Jimmy Lloyd shows and Effie and so on, as like sort of like a different type of brand. So just looking at GCW as itself, 4 of their first 5 shows were complete sellouts, or are in advance. And Columbus, I got confirmation from Brett that it wasn't sold out, but it looked pretty packed. So I would say a big success, 5 out of 5. They're running Royal Rumble weekend, of course, with the show in Florida. That's sold out in advance. Effie's Gay Brunch, like I mentioned, is the following day, which hasn't moved as many tickets, but it looks like it's doing okay. But they've sold out LA again. They sold out Arizona, which was a debut. So really doing well. And like we talked about, really smart to know like where you are, what position, like sort of like book the right venue where you can pack it out. Maybe send, like, you don't want to leave too much money on the table, but send a few people wanting. Like it builds up momentum for the next time, that people shouldn't miss out. And I haven't really watched it. I haven't watched it on Fight, not really watched it. I haven't watched it on trailer, but I'm sure it looks great when it's filled up. But talking of that, Brett said, and this has been going on for a while, Hammerstein again. He had a poll. So 2,100 people voted. Nearly 80% said do it again. To me, I think it was obviously it was the right timing 2 years ago. The creative, some people were upset by. Um, and it hurt the momentum a little bit in that way. I don't know if the timing is right to run the Hammerstein again. What do you think, John?
Tough to say. I would lean yes, but I don't. I'm not 100% sure if it is or not. Are they hot enough to do it or not? But it's weird right now with people wanting to go to shows. Like I would say, 100%. New Japan don't run Chicago. That's too big of arena, and then they sold it out plus some. So I feel like it's weird. The people wanting to go to the live shows and the bigger shows is like hot right now, despite maybe some of the other product not being hot. So it's weird. It's like AEW is ice cold, but they go to All In and sell 75,000 tickets. So you know what I mean? It's a weird world right now. I feel like people want to go to that to like those bigger shows. So I would say yes, do Hammerstein, even though it's a risk. I would say do it.
That's a good point, John. I think it's I don't know if they use this phrase anymore as much, like it's a happening, right? Like it's
Yeah.
something that people want to be at. It seems like unique that you don't want to miss out. And I wasn't thinking about it as much for traveling fans. And I know New Japan fans like to travel even in the US from state to state to see unique shows. So that's a great point. So if you can make it a happening, and there's just something to GCW at the Hammerstein returning again, that it would carry on a fair amount of momentum, but you would need, I think, the right draws, the right appeal to fully push it over the edge.
Good point. What about TNA? TNA going to Orlando.
So yeah, when they had the weekend in Orlando, it's sort of like back to reality. Smaller venue, not completely sold out, which is fine. Like, again, it's good to know where you are. They need to tape shows. This isn't too expensive. Do a double shot. So that's all well and good. Something that was quite curious about, and probably the second week's rating is out by the time you hear this, but the first week of the return of TNA on Access TV did 112,000 viewers, zero point zero 0.02 in the key demo. It was among the top 150 cable shows for the night. So a win there, based on like people's overwhelming euphoria for the return of TNA. You would think it would do like a massive number, but it is somewhat limited on access. But shows have done right into the 200,000s quite a while ago. So you would think a bit more was possible, but that's okay. I think that's a modest win for them. TNA Hard to Kill did about 8,000 traditional buys on TV. So I think that's
Hmm.
quite good because a lot of people
Don't do
don't
traditional
buy.
anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. I will admit that the pay-per-view that I order every year is the Royal Rumble, and I don't want to bother with digital, so I'm just going to buy it on my TV. So whatever the Royal Rumble does, that's a plus one from me. Um, so yeah, so that's basically TNA. I was running a poll in terms of what's the number three promotion, which we check on every once in a while, and by mistake I wrote Impact. So of course it took a while, but the TNA folks found it, and they were shaming me, perhaps rightly so.
The streaming numbers will probably go up, so it'll be more than 8,000. This will be the most they've done since Omega Kenny Swan, right? Since Omega was the champion there.
Yeah, and that's a good sign to see, because the Omega thing was like sort of like an aberration, right? You had super hot promotion at the time, sort of giving you a little bit of tailwind. Some people at the end felt it was more of a negative than a positive. It seemed positive for me for business, but that's a good thing. I think it'll be interesting to see. People came, they were curious about TNA. The show seemed to go over well. I think people forgot about there not actually being a major surprise, depending on how you count it. A few WWE ex superstars, but I think TNA is in a relatively good place right now.
Yeah, that's one of those things. I kind of forgot about that one, or I guess it didn't happen, or whatever. Just let's forget about that. Also, speaking of that, though, too, it's almost like with the NWA. Like, let's forget about the CW channel, right? It's it's probably going to be on the app, right? Like
Yeah.
one of those things. Like, let's just hopefully, Men in Black it and forget it.
Yeah, this is the weirdest, most unique rollout I can recall, and certainly in a modern way in terms between the app and a television network, because NWA really leads to confusion themselves. They put on their posters just like the CW logo. I don't know if the CW app has its own logo, but they do that, and then they announced a big upcoming show. I think it was Hard Times, and it looked to be the CW. We were reading it, on the show. I was like, oh, okay, it looks like this will be on a special, and which wasn't too surprising because WoW had the special that came and went, and no one really noticed. the Entertainment Tonight presents. But feel a little bit bad for Joe Galley, who's probably in a little bit of hot water at the NWA, and this is his, I believe, his main job now. So hopefully no problems for him. Everyone likes him. But in a recent interview, NWA lead announcer Joe Galley misspoke in saying that the NWA's as yet unnamed and unscripted show would air on the CW Network's broadcast channel. Rather, that same unscripted effort will soon premiere on the CW streaming platform, which notably will also exclusively host future episodes of NWA Power starting February 6th. The CW app is free for download.
Interesting. Wow, interesting. So even the Billy Corgan stuff won't be on CW. What about this new Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling? Obviously, the brainchild originally of Dusty. Is this a QT Marshall vehicle?
Yeah, I love this that Cody Rhodes continuing to walk in his father's footsteps, and Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling was one of those sort of odd emergences of the late 90s. It began before WCW closed. It was when Dusty Rhodes was no longer affiliated for a while with WCW, although I think he would return for the Terry Funk feud. I might be messing up the timeline there,
Ric Flair feud. He would come back for.
Okay. Kiss my white donkey, right?
Yeah.
But it was fun because you had sort of this amalgamation of his NWA people, like Barry Windham passed through, and contacts that he made in the modern day, like Steve Corino, and then you had Glacier was there. It just seemed fun. I don't they were doing the old Georgia circuit, and then it seemed to be rumors that maybe they would get on Turner Classics because they were showing old WCW and NWA tapes, but that never happened. So it wasn't especially successful, but it was a known vehicle because it was Dusty Rhodes, and there's a certain cachet to it. And I just think that's awesome that it's coming back. And it seems like they're doing it in a sustainable way, right? Like you said, QT Marshall and Teal Rhodes, hopefully I'm pronouncing her name correctly.
Yeah.
So out of the Nightmare Factory, they're going to tape the program. And that seems sustainable because you already have this training facility. I would assume, most likely be the trainees that are involved, at least at first, and then you could kind of grow from there. There was no announcement yet of a distribution platform, so I'm not sure if they're going to record the first one for broadcast or have it on YouTube or do something with it. But TCW announced its anticipated revival in McDonough, Georgia, signaling the next chapter. The first event will be sponsored by Cody Rhodes' Atlanta-based wrestling school, the Nightmare Factory, promising an entertaining and exciting evening for wrestling fans of all ages. After a 20-year hiatus, TCW is making a triumphant return to the ring and will capture excitement, adrenaline, and glory of the original events. Teal Rhodes said, proud to be part of TCW, brought to you by the Nightmare Factory, a place for wrestling's future stars to hone their skills while making new memories for wrestling fans. See you at the matches. I think that's just it's just fun. It's cool to use, IP like that.
Very cool. I do like that. It is pretty cool that they're bringing that back, and Teal's involved, so the Rhodes are involved. It's very, very, very cool. Cool little venture for TCW. But quickly, before we get to our guests, what are some indie quick hits?
So Mustafa Ali, hottest star of the indies, I would say right now, at least modern star joining. So his Canadian tour is officially sold out. A number of shows there. The Action Wrestling in Georgia sold out on January 19th. And noting the cool Circle 6 poster, they're also running in Detroit, the venue that GCW uses, and Pondo's Madhouse. So Madman Pondo, it shows a really cool picture of him with a buzz saw, I guess, or something, a baseball bat and a saw combined. But just I love the graphics like that rather than just photoshopping or copying pasting 25 guys into a poster. It makes it look cooler.
I do love it. Now, we do have a guest joining us right now, Mr. Cory Leff. What's going on, Cory? Cory of John WallStreet. How you doing?
What's up, guys? Nice to join you.
Hey, Cory. Great to meet you. Lavi here. And as you probably guessed from social media, a huge fan of your work and your efforts with John WallStreet.
Uh, the praise goes both ways, man. I'm a equally as big of a fan of yours, and your coverage of the wrestling space is second to none. So excited to join you guys.
Awesome, Corey. Just before we kind of get into John Wall Street and coverage of the business, I'm just curious, where'd you grow up? How'd you become a wrestling fan? Like, usually it's almost like where you grew up is what you were a fan of. Like, hey, I'm from the Northeast, WWF guy. But where'd you grow up and what were you a fan of?
Yeah, I grew up in North Jersey. I would say I grew up a fanatical wrestling fan in the '80s and early '90s. Actually, I would say all through the '90s. I graduated high school in 2000 and went to the 2000 Royal Rumble at MSG. So I would say my wrestling fandom certainly died off once I went to college. But as I kind of got into my 30s, I would say, and into the sports media business, I certainly picked it up again. I went to the Raw 25 show, which was a nice experience. I saw people have been tweeting about that because I guess it was 6 years ago yesterday or earlier this week. And that was a nice experience getting to go to Manhattan Center after I'd watched the shows on, at that venue all those years. That was a pretty cool experience, and went to SummerSlam a couple times when it was at Barclays Center, and now I have a 6-year-old daughter, so we've taken her to MSG and to Prudential Center for a couple of shows. So yeah, second generation now. We're trying to build a wrestling fan here.
Nice, I love it. I'm actually was born in North Jersey as well. Graduated in 2000. Do have a 6-year-old daughter, so a lot of things in
Where
common.
where?
I grew up in Harrison, New Jersey, and then I moved to Homedale when I was 4 or 5, I think. Yeah, about 4 or 5.
Yeah, I'm from
So,
Livingston, so I live
oh
in.
my God, my aunt lives in Livingston. Nice, or the town over. She lives in North Arlington, but her son lives in Livingston. But she's basically super close to live. Wow, interesting. What a small world.
Small
And
world,
I was
man.
at Royal Rumble 2000 as well. So what a small world.
That's it. It's pretty wild, I'm sure you guys see it, and maybe it's just my feed, but I'm an active Twitter user, and it's wild that things that seem like yesterday are now showing up as happened 25 years ago.
Insane.
I'm sure
Yep.
you guys talk about this all the time, but it's pretty surreal for me. And then, of course, it's equally surreal to see like the guys that used to be our favorite stars in the ring now kind of running the promotion and all that kind of stuff.
Crazy. It's funny. It's like, wow, just yesterday, Flair wins the 92 Rumbles. Like, no, that was 30 years ago. You're like, oh my God, what the hell? Where did the time go? Time flew by. Jesus.
So, well, we're big Devils fans, and I'm sure you guys know they use the Ric Flair woo pretty heavily in the game promotions. My daughter, like, showing her Ric Flair highlights all the time. Yeah, wrestling, big part of our lives, I would say, still, even though I
Oh,
don't
yeah.
watch promotion, every Monday like I used to.
So, how does wrestling and sports and finance, how does that intersect for you?
So WWE is obviously publicly traded and has been for some time now under the TKO banner. So had kind of been covering that business, which is remarkable business and has been for some time. And that business was really interesting because they were super ahead of the curve on the OTT front too, right? They were one of the first rights owners to launch their own over the top platform. So I feel like WWE has been a very progressive company in the sports kind of business landscape, very always kind of at the forefront of trend and technology. So I've been certainly aware of them, and then obviously Tony has built a monstrosity of a business too. So you have two really big businesses that I would say I kind of follow. Perhaps more from a business end than I do from an in-ring perspective, but took in an AEW show over the summer too.
Nice. So, what about John Wall Street? Tell us more about it and why you started and what it's all about.
So John WallStreet kind of brings together all the things that I've done in my life. I started my career in sports talk radio. Actually, I wanted to be Mike Francesa as a kid.
Oh, yeah.
I,
He's the man.
I
There was the
started
man.
my So grew up with Mike and the Mad Dog. Got discovered by John Rooney when I went to the University of Arizona. So I kind of had my dream job when I was 20, but it was paying like 18.5. So it didn't stay my dream job for all that long. I ended up working startup for a while. I got into the equity research space. And that's kind of where I brought the idea for John WallStreet together. Where it was just like, hey, let's kind of bring everything I know together: sports, business, finance, and maybe I can make people a little bit smarter. Initially, I thought it was going to be content marketing to sell equity research, but the audience that I started to build was like not the institutional investor, but like the who's who of sports and media. And so I changed the focus a bit and started writing for that audience. And it's kind of grown out of that. It's become a full-time job, which is great. I went to Sports Illustrated for a cup of coffee, and then I spent 3 years at Sportico as the morning newsletter there. And then in January of 23, I left to build out a broader kind of advisory, consulting, events, and research business around what's become a pretty powerful brand in the sports and media landscape.
Lavi, I know you got a bunch of good questions.
Thanks, John. So, normally on this podcast, we don't talk a lot of WWE, but what a week it's been. So maybe to focus on an area that others aren't talking about as much. So obviously we had this huge announcement with Netflix, $5 billion over 10 years, covering many international markets eventually as those rights come up. Some are looking at it of saying like maybe it's not such a great a deal as it looks like. Maybe it's just like 1.3x. Everyone's sorting it out, so we can talk about that for a second. But the second part that I'm wondering about was when the news broke. This Delicious would be just putting it in too small context, but the alleged horrible behavior of Vince McMahon and payoffs and so on. Do you think, like, if somebody's a Netflix executive, from your perspective, like, what do you think that they think about all of this news breaking the day after? And do you think this industry lends itself to regrets in that way, or everything is just like full steam ahead?
Gosh, there's a bunch of different angles there. I guess I wasn't particularly surprised by the WWE Netflix deal. The number jumps off the page, right? $5 billion is obviously a very big number, but I don't think on like a per annual basis it's a huge increase. I think it's pretty flat, which is kind of where people have seen the market or projected the market would be, not just for WWE, just for media rights in general. That people have kind of suggested that for a lot of properties, best case scenario would be flat. So from that perspective, I think WWE did fine, maybe better than fine. From the Netflix perspective, I don't think this means that they're going to be the next big entrant into live sports rights, as some have suggested. I think WWE is much more akin to scripted programming than it is live sports rights. But kind of the beauty of live sports rights from a content generation perspective is that the outcome is guaranteed. We know exactly how many subscribers are going to tune in for WWE wrestling. With a Netflix show, you don't know that the case. You could spend millions and millions of dollars on production, and it might be a bust. So it's a pretty safe bet for Netflix. They know what they're going to get. Now, as it relates to Vince McMahon and the allegations this week, I don't think it'll end up impacting the Netflix deal. I think that I certainly have no insight to anything, just speculation. Just my gut tells me when WWE, as a publicly traded company, I think that this stuff, I think this ultimately will end up forcing Vince away from the company. And if that happens, then I don't think this has any impact on the Netflix deal at all. It probably dies down relatively quickly, and everything just kind of moves forward. It's certainly an unfortunate timing if you're a Netflix executive. But I would be. I can't see any way that the deal doesn't happen.
So one of the things that I've always been curious about pro wrestling is that in comparison to sports, you hadn't gotten a lot of like private equity, Wall Street investment, meaning outside of WWE in the US. Of course, Tony Khan has private money to invest, but I've always been waiting for a time where there was a handful of like impactful free agents on the market. That's no longer the case. But a few weeks ago, we speculated on, let's say, like a CM Punk, a Brock Lesnar, a Ronda Rousey, just throwing out Batista, who's in his mid-50s or whatever it may be, where people with a fair amount of money who seem to throw money at sports to try things have never really done that with pro wrestling at like a high level to like, okay, let's put in tens of millions or more to make things work. Why, if you feel that that's accurate, like, why do you feel that doesn't happen in pro wrestling as much as sports?
It's a really good question. I'm not sure why it hasn't happened. I would imagine that part of it is, I think part of the appeal to sports ownership is kind of the cachet that comes with it, right? Like to be able to say you're an NFL team owner, right? Or to say you're an NBA team owner, that's a very exclusive club and opens the doors to a lot of rooms that you might not otherwise be able to get into. I don't think throwing $10 billion of pro wrestling gets you into any rooms. You know, Tony Khan gets into more rooms because he's the owner of the Jaguars than because he's the owner of the AEW. I mean, that's not even debatable. So that probably has something to do with it. I will say this. When I remember I had a conversation with Tony very early on when he launched AEW. And I said to him, people have tried spring football a million times. We've seen those leagues fail time and time again. Why would a second wrestling promotion be successful? And Tony said, you would have a better chance of starting a third wrestling promotion than you would a second football league. And the simple answer, and I believe that, and by the way, that's not exclusive to wrestling. The same thing goes for mixed martial arts. The same thing goes for boxing. Because these individual sports, you only need one or two guys at the top of the ladder, the top of the promotion, and everybody thinks it's the best, right? So AEW gets John Moxley and help me out.
MJF.
No, but he wasn't one of the big stars they got. At the
to bring in someone from the outside. Who else did they bring in, John?
Yeah, who did they bring in? Who did they get at the early, right at the beginning?
Chris Jericho.
Jericho, right. So they got Jericho, and they they got the twins, and all of a sudden they had like 3, 4, 5 of the top guys from in the sport at the top of the promotion. And that's the same thing with UFC, right? Everybody thinks the UFC is the best MMA promotion because they have well, not right now, but the Conor McGregors and Ronda Rouseys of the world they have historically, right? Nobody knows. Even the hardest core MMA fan doesn't know the fighters between, on the non-pay-per-views, basically, right? Like the guys fighting on the undercard. So if you could get 1 or 2 stars at the top of the card, you have the opportunity to flip everybody's perception. You can't do that in football. There aren't enough good NFL quarterbacks as there are, never mind to start a second spring football league or a second football league. So, in terms of viability, if you're going to pump money into it, I think you can make a strong argument that it would be a better investment to start another pro wrestling circuit or another MMA league or a boxing outfit versus a competing Big Four sports league. That seems like a logical enough solution. And if you wanted to make that argument, I think you could kind of extrapolate that to pro soccer here in the U.S. too.
Yeah, and your example of like getting top stars and sort of turning things around, I think that's classic WCW, which took a little while to find the right formula, right? But bringing Hogan, Savage, all those people over, and it wasn't. Then you found like the right formula of like the NWO, and then you're like off and running. So
I had an interesting conversation yesterday. This is probably taking your audience way off topic, but it's a story that I'm going to run next week. So I'm not sure, or maybe in the following week, but it's about the Barstool and DraftKings story. Did you guys see that? Did you guys see, are you guys familiar with what's going on? And so Barstool was tied up with Penn Gaming as the Barstool Sportsbook. But then Penn dumped them for $1 so that they could sign with ESPN Bet. Remember? So Dave Portnoy bought Barstool back. Then he's just yesterday, or by the time you guys release this, it'll probably be last week or whatever, but then sold the rights to DraftKings to the Barstool's sports betting rights, not the they're now aligned with DraftKings. So there has been some speculation that one of the ways that the Barstool audience could drive their fan base to DraftKings, which would ultimately net them money and revenues, is by creating that kind of wrestling style us versus them. It's it's the DraftKings sportsbook versus the Penn sportsbook, and so just thought that was interesting. That was one of the ways that some sports betting insiders, some real knowledgeable, smart people, are suggesting could be a strategy to drive market share.
I guess it's like betting tribalism, right? Like you pick your team and then you're all in.
Well, that's exactly it, right? You have all these apps, right? You could go and bet with all these different online sports betting apps. Product, some will differentiate for some, but for a lot of others, it's that tribalism, or it could be, is the theory.
So, Cory, I need your expertise, and perhaps you only usually do this during a consulting session, but I do want to learn. So,
Sure.
let's say I'm a pro wrestling promotion that's a challenger brand that has some momentum that's emerged. Let's focus on like a family or for all perceptions. Let's say like a Game Changer Wrestling, GCW. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but as compared to, let's say, like a Jeannie Buss Wow or Billy Corgan owned NWA, let's say like a GCW. And I'm like, okay, I could get to a certain level. I'm doing great with Triller and so on. But to get to the next level, I want to get investments. So unless you happen to have a Wall Street guy in the front row, which could very much happen, what would a company like GCW do to raise capital? Where would they go?
Well, they probably should hire a banker. That's probably a good place to start. I honestly, that is a little, I don't know. I don't know what the market is for investment in those types. I don't know. I actually don't really know what the business opportunity is, to be honest. Is actually probably the place for me to start. I don't know what the upside for those kind of companies is. Is that you tell me. I mean, I have no idea what kind of revenues they generate. So it's probably a bit beyond my scope. Is I guess the short answer. But I'd like to think that, just generally speaking, getting at what I was just suggesting, that the pro wrestling is interesting. Live sports is interesting because you know what the guaranteed audience is. If a promotion can build this, a constant, steady audience, they should be able to sell media rights, and that's becomes attractive. Now, the issue becomes the pay TV landscape is shrinking, right? And so more of the money is funneling up to the top. So WWE, they're able to command flat revenues, right? Maybe AEW can do the same, but that means that there's less money for everybody else. So does it become more challenging for those promotions? They may need to find other ways to generate revenue. The guaranteed media rights that they perhaps have pursued in the past are likely not going to be there in the future. The good news is that you have these, like I said, we talk about building fan bases. If you can build a fan base that will pay for a subscription to an OTT platform or subscription service like that, we're getting into a world where you can start to buy products and services through those platforms. There are other ways to go about monetizing the audience. So again, but it all starts with product, and it all starts with building a fan base, and that's ultimately what everybody's goal should be. And it's not about reaching the most fans. I think this is like a theme that I'm thinking about just across sports. It's not about reaching 1 million fans or 100 million fans. It's not about having 1 million fans or 100 million fans. It's about having 1 million fans or 100 million fans that will pay for your products, buy your stuff. That's where the value is.
So it's actually interesting, and Cory, I'm sure you're familiar with the promotion just because they've had certain highs and lows with the now renamed TNA, previously Impact Wrestling, previously TNA. they have a lot of legacy fans. Like if you say anything about TNA on Twitter, like they come out, but they don't. I mean, they bought 8,000 pay-per-views on traditional TV last week, but they don't seem to come out to spend money. But they have so many views on YouTube, so many followers on Twitter. I think some of it is legacy, but like I don't know if they could convert them to money again.
Yeah, I have a hard time like really valuing that kind of stuff. I think that there's just I think about this all the time. For a long time, we've heard that it's the NFL, and then it's baseball and the NBA in one order or the other, and then it's the NHL, and then it's Major League Soccer, and go down the kind of the value chain. And the only reason we think that is because of Nielsen ratings. That's literally the only reason that anybody suggests that's the reason. But I don't think that that's the only way to calculate. I know that's not the only way to calculate fandom nowadays. It's very hard to buy into all of the social metrics. We know a lot of them are BS, right? Like, I mean, Facebook and them have admitted to, embellishing those numbers. So again, I think it's about, when we talk about the value of these assets, it's about the number of people that are willing to pay for your products and to buy your products. And so people that are willing to casually watch some views on social media, I don't think that's not a fan. That's a casual observer. A fan is somebody who is willing to buy what you're selling. And so I'm not sure maybe I didn't answer your question, but those people that have, an affinity for TNA from 15 or 20 years ago and might be willing to watch some highlights, those aren't fans. Those are casual observers. Fans are the people that, show up at the arena, buy the pay-per-views, order the t-shirts, that kind of stuff.
No, I love that. That's actually the clearest distinction. Like in my mind, I'm gonna like categorize that now. Let me turn over to John.
What is next for you? What do you got coming up down the pike?
In terms of content, or in terms of events and such?
Content for the site.
Content. I had a good story on Monday about Sports Illustrated. Really good story coming out on Monday about like the whole. You guys familiar with what's going on with sports? The Sports
Everybody's
Illustrated.
gone. Right?
I'm sorry.
Everybody's going to be gone.
That had been the narrative last week. That doesn't appear to be the case. Sports Illustrated is going to continue to exist in one form or another. That seems pretty certain. Whether or not it's with this editorial team, again, remains to be seen. The way I'm kind of getting into it is more from the perspective of there's this narrative that private equity has killed Sports Illustrated, and that's just not true. I mean, first of all, Authentic Brands Group bought this company in like 2018 or 2019. So, I mean, it's hard to say that Sports Illustrated was really clicking on all cylinders in 2018 or 2019, right? Like this brand, Sports Illustrated hasn't been a relevant brand in 20 years, or at least what it once was in 20 years. So the narrative that Sports Illustrated, that private equity has killed it, is just patently false. But the second part of that is that the bigger issue is that the internet is what has killed Sports Illustrated. And it's kind of getting, Lobby, what we were just talking about. It's not about the amount of people that will watch a 30-second clip or a 10-second clip, which is how most people are now consuming media, right? Like, people don't read a 2,000-word article on a game. It's just not the way people consume media anymore. Sports Illustrated never adapted with the modern environment. If Sports Illustrated was doing instant reaction to the WWE story that dropped yesterday about Vince, Sports Illustrated would still hold relevance. They're not, and so they don't. But the idea is that, so that's one part of the conversation. The second part of the conversation is that Sports Illustrated is not dead. Sports Illustrated is more profitable today than it was 20 years ago. The licensing business is very profitable. The margins are huge. So, and by the way, that business can continue to exist as long as SI just plugs along. It doesn't have to become what it once was. They can build a very nice, profitable licensing business with SI just being a middle of the road publication like it's been for the last 20 years. So SI is not going anywhere. This is kind of the latest speed bump for a brand that's had a whole bunch of speed bumps in the last half decade. But that's the story I have on Monday. Tuesday, I got a fun story coming up with Steve Ballmer, owner of the Los Angeles Clippers. They were recently awarded the 2026 NBA All-Star Game. But the reason we write the story is because they're building what is like the most tech-enabled venue in sports. And the whole concept of the sporting experience sucks. Going to a live sporting event is not good. It's terrible from like driving to the stadium, to the parking, to getting in the venue, the food and beverage, the bathroom lines. The whole thing sucks. They're going to use technology that's already readily available to make that process better, which is a step in the right direction. And we're going to get into that. So that's Tuesday.
Good stuff. Where could everybody follow you, find you, get you social media and website wise?
So you can find me. You can sign up for the newsletter at johnwallstreet.com, johnwallstreet.com or johnwallstreet.com/subscribe. You can find me on Twitter at Howie Longshort is my Twitter handle. Yeah, those are the ways to get me.
All right. Awesome. Cory, thank you so much for all the time. Let's wrap this bad boy up. Lavi, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at 2Man Power Trip. Lavi, where can everybody find you?
Yes, follow me on Twitter, LavieMarg, LavieMarg. And reminder that we are the official business podcast of PW Ponderings.
Awesome. Thank you, Cory. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. See you right back here next time for a little business of the business. We'll see you next week, folks.